we're talking about family culture because this month's challenge is family culture and, all the different things to do, all the different habits for family culture. So as part of family culture, we've been talking about how to bring more peace to your home. So we're going to do 5 things. Number 1, I'm calling this one, come to your senses. And the reason, Greg was like, what? Doesn't make any sense. The reason I'm calling it come to your senses, because at least for me, I have noticed that whenever there is chaos in my home or craziness or frustration, annoyance, irritation, anger, generally what's happening in my head is me telling some story to myself about why I'm so upset. Oh, I'm so annoyed and frustrated because blah, 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 blah. I'm so annoyed by that. So irritated by what's happening. I'm telling myself a story, right? In my head.
And
That's what's going
and
on.
it gets you really worked up to a state where you're not really thinking clearly, and you
Because
become,
emotions are
yep,
involved.
and you become a little more hypersensitive. Can anybody relate to this?
Thoughts feed emotions and emotions feed thoughts. It's like a loop. It's a circle. So if you feel a negative emotion and then you think negative things, you'll feel more negative emotions. And then you'll think more negative things. It's a downward spiral. So you have to interrupt that cycle in order to change it. So you either have to feel better or think better in order to start spiraling the other way. So come to your senses essentially means, in a way, stop thinking. And one of the simplest ways to do that is to start just being in the present moment. So that can be simply, obviously, breathing, taking a breath, just listening to what's around you, even if it's crazy. One of the things that we do is we tend to judge the sounds we hear. So if we hear screaming or a certain voice we don't like, we judge that rather than just simply listening to it. Just like, oh, that's a sound. You can look. So just look at the person. Just no judgment. Just look at them. Look at their eyes. Look at their face. Look at their hands.
And,
Um,
and and what you're doing is trying to calm down the hyper reactive, I'm about to explode and say and
basal
do
ganglia,
things that I'm going
fight
to
or flight mode.
regret, which usually gets into fight mode.
Yeah. Look at their eyes. You can just smell whatever you smell in the room. Maybe you smell them. Maybe you smell your own hair. I don't know. You're coming to your senses because the more you feel your senses, the more present you will be. Usually anger and frustration are more, it's not about necessarily what's happening in the present moment. It's more catastrophizing what might happen or what's going to happen or what it means or the significance you're giving it. It's not about being in the present. Once you're in the present, you're actually more like, oh, okay, it's not that big of a deal, right? Another thing though is touch. And in fact, I've noticed this. It's hard to disagree with your spouse when you're touching. Generally, when people start to disagree, they pull away from each other and they get further apart. If you get closer and you touch, it's more difficult to get upset. And the same is true with your kids. So sometimes, even if they're getting upset or I'm getting upset, I'll just touch them. I'll touch their head. I like to play with their ears. Like I'll just do something that brings me in the present with them and reminds me, yeah, you're a human I love. So let's
The
calm
ear
down.
thing's weird.
I know. I like
You're
ears.
just like, instead of
I
yanking on
do.
your ear like I want
Sometimes I
to,
yank on my kid's ear playfully though. Stop doing that. Okay. But it's all a way of coming to the present moment. So that's the first one. Come to your senses.
um, just for context, and again, uh, like I want this to be real for you and just kind of see the moment. Um, I imagine because we've done it and I've observed it, like whether your child is 5 or 15, you can see the behavior and then you start like blowing it out of proportion and you start getting really worked up
Well,
in the
especially
thing.
especially if there's a lot of emotional stacking that's
Yeah.
going on. If it's a thing that's happened again and again and again, and you've given it all of this emotion and meaning and it's never been resolved, you're just stacking and stacking and stacking, right? So, and then what happens is it's essentially memorized emotion. It's like habitual responses. It's not even like the thing, maybe it's not even that big of a deal. But because we have all of this stacking and all this memorized emotion around this thing, all of that comes up and out over something small and insignificant. So bringing it back and coming to your senses and coming back to the present moment helps you, like, ideally, right? You want to process and release all of that stacking. But in the moment when you can't necessarily do that, you just come back to where you are, breathing, feeling, even just noticing, like feeling your body, like, oh, okay, I'm sitting in this chair. I can feel my legs on the chair. I can feel my feet on the floor. Oh, if I pay attention, I can feel the back of my elbow. All of that helps you to be more present in the moment, which then just calms you down.
But one of the main reasons here, and man, if I can have all of your attention right now to this little thing, something like that, whatever it is for you, will prevent you and I from saying and doing things that we're going to regret and that are super damaging. Because if we let it build and we kind of lose our senses, then we end up saying things like, "You are the most annoying child." And you might feel that
In the
and
moment.
you in the moment, and you might actually kind of think it's true. But once those words have left our mouths and landed on our kiddos, we can't take them back. And that easily becomes a part of that child's identity. And your child's identity will eventually determine their behavior and their
Yeah.
life path. And so if I lose my senses and say, "You're so stupid," or "Why can't you ever do anything right? Why do you always have to cause problems?" You see what I've just done there? I've done some crazy hurtful things that can have long-lasting consequences. So this kind of silly step of, come back to your senses, it's really powerful because you're like, "Oh, wait a minute. I'm gonna chill here for a minute. I'm gonna come back to just being in this moment so that I don't overreact to what's happening."
Well, and the other thing it does is it helps you to, because you said it prevents you from saying or doing the wrong things. It also helps you to say and do the right things because, one of the biggest keys to knowing what to say or do when parenting your child is using intuition. But if we are upset and angry, intuition doesn't work. We can't get intuition
Right.
if we're not peaceful and calm. So the key to knowing what to do in the moment of helping your child comes from us being calm so we can receive the intuition to know what to say and do.
Yep. Beautiful.
So that's another key piece. A child's behavior is directly connected to their self-image.
Write that down.
Think about that for a second.
If you're taking notes, write that down. If you're not taking notes, start taking notes and write that down.
Your child's behavior is directly connected and influenced by their self-image. The way they view themselves will determine how they act and behave. And guess what determines a child's self-image? The way their parents view them and treat them. So the way you view and treat your child will determine their self-image, which will then determine their behavior. Now you can see quickly how that can turn into a negative downward spiral. Because if you view them in a way, even if it's said not really meaning it, in anger, and you say something that then determines their self-image, that will then cause them to have behavior which you hate and is annoying, which then
They'll just keep doing it.
now
It
you just have a
reinforces it.
worse image of them, which then reinforces their self-image, which then reinforces the behavior, and there you go, round and round. So the only way to change that is to switch that cycle around. You have to have a better self-image of your child, a better image of your child. And then you have to emphasize that and say it and share it and tell them
and treat
and treat
them
them that way.
as you want them to be.
And then that will alter their self-image, which will then alter their behavior. If you try to alter behavior alone, you'll never get what you're after. You have to alter confidence, competence, and their self-image in order to get the behavior you want.
It's so profound, so profound. If you see them a certain way and they see themselves that way, the only way to change that cycle is for you to view them differently. Unfortunately, kind of just by default, most of us give a huge emotional reaction to the negative thing and a tiny, tiny, insignificant compliment to the good thing. Well, which one's
if
gonna,
we give one
if
at
we
all,
give
yeah.
anything at all? So which one's gonna stand out subconsciously in the mind of the child? Oh, I'm the one that does the negative thing.